And I think the way that we learn languages nowadays, with so much technology, applications, nowadays artificial intelligence, well, it's much easier. It's much, much easier to practice language learning and practice speaking than it used to be. 10, 15 years ago, maybe you'd be able to use Google Translate, but Google Translate wasn't very good. Maybe you could use Duolingo in the early stages of the application, but, well, I've never been a big fan of Duolingo. I don't think it's a good way to learn a language. Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to the podcast. I'm Lewis, and this is British English Pod. How are you? How's your day going? Has it been a good morning so far? Or maybe you're listening in the afternoon, the evening, or the night. In my case, you probably know by now that I usually record these podcasts on Thursday afternoon after I finish my morning classes with the British English Immersion Club. There's a link in the description in case you want to join my group classes or take private classes with me. But that's enough about that, because today I want to get straight to the point. I want to cut to the chase and begin directly with this topic, because if you are listening to my podcast, it is because you want to improve your British English skills, or maybe just you want to improve your English in general. And if so, well, you're in the right place, I hope. And I hope you enjoy this podcast. If so, please leave a like, or if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you leave a 5-star review so more people can discover the pod. But yeah, on a normal podcast, I will speak about different topics, random topics, but I rarely actually speak about language learning and give you tips to improve your English at the same time. So I thought it's about time that I dedicate an episode to improving your English and going from maybe a beginner or an intermediate level, transforming and leveling up to an upper intermediate, advanced, and hopefully near fluent English. To be honest, I reckon if you listen to the podcast, your English is already pretty good. Maybe you're not fluent. Maybe you feel like when you're speaking, your mind goes blank, or you're like, what was the word? It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's the thing that does the thing. And if that is the case, I feel you. I understand you. I comprehend you. I've been there, because you might not know this, but I am a language enthusiast as well. I wasn't lucky to study languages when I was a child, at least not so much, because when you grow up in the United Kingdom in a very English environment, as I did, you're not really encouraged to learn foreign languages. But I guess I'm a bit of a weirdo. I'm a bit odd. I'm a bit bizarre. I'm a bit strange. So in my case, I enjoyed learning languages. I found it fun. I found it kind of exciting to pretend that I was from a different country and I was speaking to different people from around the world. So I'm kind of the exception. But when I was growing up, the only languages that I started to be taught a little bit were French and Spanish, but like 1 hour per week in a group of 30 people. So I didn't actually improve my language skills until I made the decision to go to university and study modern foreign languages. And I did that, well, partly because I didn't know what to do with my life. Also because I wanted to go to uni just to be independent and to go partying with my friends and have a good time. And because I thought that studying languages would open up so many doors and give me so many possibilities in the future, which I'd say is probably quite true. I think the more languages you speak and the better you speak those languages, the more opportunities will open up in your future. So I already knew a little bit of Spanish. My Spanish was okay, but nothing special. I couldn't have fluent conversations at all. But I didn't speak any Italian, and for some reason, I decided to study Spanish, Italian, and later a little bit of Portuguese. So I have studied languages myself at university, and I think the way that we learn languages nowadays with so much technology, applications, nowadays artificial intelligence, well, it's much easier. It's much, much easier to practice language learning and practice speaking than it used to be. 10, 15 years ago, maybe you'd be able to use Google Translate, but Google Translate wasn't very good. Maybe you could use Duolingo in the early stages of the application, but, well, I've never been a big fan of Duolingo. I don't think it's a good way to learn a language. Whether it's fun or not, I think that's a different matter. But yeah, when I was at uni, I had to try to watch series, I had to use textbooks, and I had to maybe listen to music, but I think it was much harder back then to find these resources compared to nowadays when, for example, on Instagram and TikTok, you can easily find many teachers, like myself, who share different language learning tips, or just random people from, for example, the English-speaking world, and you can follow them to immerse yourself in the language. And I must admit that now I'm working, I'm busy, I don't have a lot of free time. I struggle to actually put a lot of these pieces of advice into action and continue to develop my Italian or my Portuguese because I haven't got the time. But if you're listening to this podcast, it means that, well, maybe you have the time and you're willing to prioritize your language learning. So enough about that. I'm going to start to share my screen. No worries if you don't want to watch and you just want to listen, that's absolutely fine. But I've got a document which I prepared with a little bit of help from artificial intelligence, which lists plenty of different tips of how you can learn a language and become fluent in a language, whilst providing some science to back up these claims and some bullet points that I will discuss and also share my own opinions about each tip at the same time. So, I hope you're ready. Are you ready? Fingers crossed. And actually, now that we're going to get ready to cut to the chase and get down to business, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. So right now, I am rolling up my sleeves because I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, and the expression to roll up your sleeves is used when you get ready to work or you get ready to make an effort. So I have just rolled up my sleeves and I'm going to share my screen and we're going to discuss it and I'll read it at the same time. So the title of the document is The Best Ways to Learn a Language and Become Fluent. But before I get started, tell me, what do you think are the best ways to learn a language and become fluent? A, do you think you should learn just by speaking and chatting to people? B, do you think you should learn by going to different courses or maybe preparing yourself for an exam? C, do you think you should learn by flirting with lots of people on Tinder and other dating websites? Or another method. There are many different methods. Lots of them might be appropriate and might be successful. so I'm going to discuss them now. Here goes. Learning a new language is one of the most rewarding things you can do, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. Many students believe fluency is only about memorizing vocabulary or mastering grammar rules. In reality, language learning is much more about habits, mindset, and meaningful practice. So that being said, here are some science-backed strategies, practical tips, and conversation questions to help you make faster progress and sound more natural when speaking English, or any other language for that matter. And the first tip is to focus on input before output. And here's the science. According to linguist Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, we acquire language by understanding messages, not by memorizing rules. The more comprehensible input you get, reading and listening that you mostly understand, the faster you internalize the language. This is because your brain starts noticing patterns and structures naturally, even without explicit grammar study. So what can we do? What are the practical tips? Well, you can watch TV shows, YouTube videos, or listen to podcasts slightly above your level or even at the same level. You can use subtitles in English, important here, not your native language, to train your brain to connect sounds and spelling. And you can read short articles or stories daily, underlining phrases or expressions you find interesting or new. And then, of course, you can look it up and see if these expressions are repeated again and again. And in that case, you know they are useful and they're not redundant or old-fashioned. And here you can try to infer the meaning of new words from context, rather than immediately translating. So before looking up the meaning, see if you can figure out what it means. So let's give an example. You're reading a text and it says, if you need to brush up on any new words, make sure that you start listening, reading, and immersing yourself in the language. And you might not know the phrasal verb brush up on. So think about the context. Okay, you can do this by reading, listening, and immersing yourself in the language. So in that case, you might think brush up on. Maybe it means like to remember or something similar, which it pretty much does. If you brush up on new words or phrases, then you're like reviewing words. Words that maybe you knew in the past, but since then you have forgotten and they have slipped your mind. So that's a little example. And another example provided is that when watching a series, instead of pausing for every unknown word, focus on the plot and emotions. Then later, you can review the 3 or 5 expressions that caught your attention, that grabbed your attention. And let's just have a look at this expression, which is immerse yourself in the language. And it means to surround yourself with the language as much as possible. And to be honest, this is the thing that I try to do with this podcast and with this YouTube channel. I want to provide you with so much content, so many short videos, so many long videos, that if you want, you can just listen to them and watch them back to back, one by one, over and over again. And through listening to me speaking so much, or listening to other people who create similar content, you will be immersing yourself in the language. A funny thing happened to me a couple of weekends ago when I went to Paris. and I went to Paris with a Parisian. Then also my Spanish fiance and her Spanish friend. So we were speaking Spanish half of the time. But because we met up with some of my French friends, my French friends, that was a mouthful. It was difficult to say. So we met up with some of my French friends. We ended up speaking in French. And I was kind of having fun with it, joking with it, being like, oh, sacré bleu, oulala, oh, putain, oh, franchement, c'est pas... And I was speaking so much French that by the end of the weekend, I was like, oh, okay. I always criticize my own ability to speak French, but franchement, to be frank, to be honest, it's not that bad. Or at least it isn't that bad after immersing myself in the language. So that's what you have to try to do. Whether it's by speaking to friends or just listening to things and watching things, you need to try to surround yourself with the language as much as possible. And I want you to answer this conversation question. What are your favorite English language shows, podcasts, or books, and why? In my case, my favorite English language podcast is Football Weekly by The Guardian, because I'm a big footy fan. But tell me about yours. Your favorite book, podcast, series, you name it, leave it in the comments. And let's move on to number 2, which is that you should speak from day one, even if you make mistakes. So you should speak from day one. Do not hesitate and put off speaking. Do it as quickly as possible. And here's the science behind it. Studies in second language acquisition show that output, actually producing the language, helps consolidate learning. Speaking forces your brain to retrieve vocabulary and grammar, which strengthens memory and helps you notice gaps in your knowledge. It seems obvious, right? The more you speak, the better you will speak. And to be honest, that's why in my own classes, I focus almost entirely on speaking, whilst learning words, reviewing synonyms. But I think the most important thing for learners is just to speak. Because it's probably the only thing that is difficult to do on your own. But there are ways to do it on your own. For example, you can talk to an AI conversation bot. Of course, you can talk to a language partner if you're doing like a language exchange where you will teach them your language and they will teach you English at the same time. That way, it's cheap as chips. It's cheap as chips, meaning it's really cheap. Or, of course, you can speak to a tutor, a teacher, like me. And the next point is don't worry. Don't worry about mistakes. Because native speakers make them all the time. All the time. Genuinely. I sometimes realize when I'm speaking, and in particular when I'm speaking like this, on my own, in front of a microphone and a screen, that I'm like, oh, God damn it. Because maybe I say a word that I shouldn't have said, or I say a preposition that I shouldn't have said, and I'm 100% English. I'm a native English speaker. But despite that, I can still make mistakes. I'm sure you do the same in your mother tongue as well, where you'll randomly say something wrong. So if native English speakers make mistakes, then of course you're going to make mistakes as well. Obviously, we want to reduce the amount of mistakes that we make, and that way you will sound as much as possible like a native speaker. But every now and again, making some little errors is no big deal. It doesn't matter. And if you do make mistakes, often it's a good way of remembering not to make that mistake in the future because it'll stick in your head. It might be embarrassing. And then you'll be like, okay, now I know never to say shit instead of sheet. Ha 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 ha. Now, moving on to the next practical tip, which is what I'm doing right now. Record yourself speaking, and if you're brave, if you can be bothered, listen back, and you'll notice improvements over time. You see, I agree with the notion of recording yourself speaking, but I don't really agree with listening back, because who's got the time? Who can be bothered? And I'm sure if you're anything like me, when you hear your own voice on a recording, voicemail, video, it's always a bit, ugh, it's a bit cringy. You're like, oh no, do I really sound like that? Oh, I thought I sounded so much cooler. Or I thought I had such a deep voice and I sound like a little fairy. So yeah, record yourself, but if you can't be bothered listening back to your own voice, then that's completely normal. I think it's more normal, in fact. And the other one, use self-talk. So this is similar, but without recording yourself. It's just, describing your actions in English. So right now I am recording a podcast. Later, I'm going to go for a walk. This morning, I was teaching some classes. I've just had lunch. So to make lunch, I chopped up some carrots, poured a bit of olive oil on some hummus, and then I had carrots and hummus, which is a bit of a sad lunch, but don't worry. For dinner, I will make up for it. That means I will compensate for it. And I'll make up for it by having a huge tray of food. That's what I like to do. I starve myself during the day, and then I pig out at night. That's just me. So a couple of important words to bear in mind and keep in mind moving forward is that, well, you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes, and you should learn by doing. And given that I was just self-talking, talking to myself, do you ever do this? Do you ever talk to yourself and describe your routine and describe what you're doing, or even describe how you feel about something? Because I used to do this when I was walking around after class, or I was walking around after watching a series. I'd test my memory and see if I could remember some of the content. And then it was amazing because if I did remember some of these words or phrases, they'd stick because I had tested myself a few times, and repetition really does work. Repetition is key. So when I was walking around trying to remember a phrase, I was like, yes, I know it. I've got it. Come on. Let's move on now to the third point. And the title is to learn chunks, not just words. What this means is chunks, like phrases, collocations, not just words on their own. And the reason behind this, the science that makes this so important, is that cognitive research shows that fluent speakers use chunks or formulaic sequences, groups of words that often appear together. And learning these helps you speak faster and more naturally. Very common examples would be it depends. Depend. And many people make a mistake with this verb, and in particular with the preposition. They'll say, it depends of the day. No! Or they'll say, it depends of the weather. Ah! So instead of memorizing single words, learn them in context and learn the verb with the preposition. It depends on the day. It depends on the weather. And collocations are really important with this because there are many simple words, simple nouns that only really go with certain verbs. Like make a decision, take a break, have a drink. So if we link these phrases together to create chunks, then it will be much more memorable. It's more likely that these phrases will actually stay in your long-term memory because you are associating it with an action and something that is more likely to stick in your brain. So that's it. We need to learn chunks rather than just words. And another tip here is that if you're a bit old school, if you're a bit old-fashioned, you can keep a notebook of expressions that you hear in real life or media. When you hear these phrases, think, oh, I'm just going to jot that down. I'm just going to write that down. Or in my case, I've always got my phone. So I'm going to hear something and then I'll be like, okay, make a decision. Perfect. Take a break. Lovely. What was the other one? Have a drink. Awesome. And by being more active, again, it's more likely that you'll memorize it. And another little example, if you already have quite a high level of English, is if you want to incorporate advanced phrases, idioms, colloquialisms, slang, and phrasal verbs, you can keep a note of them. Instead of saying, I have a meeting after work, ask yourself, is there an alternative way to say that? Is there another way to make me sound more natural or more native-like? You can look it up online and then think, I've got a meeting lined up after work. Both of them are correct, of course. But when you reach an intermediate level, it's good to try and push yourself. And every time you're going to say a basic phrase, see if the next time you can mix it up and add colloquialisms, slang, phrasal verbs, and idioms like this. And another thing that we should always remember is it's better to learn in context. Don't just memorize words. Learn how they are used in real life. Now, let me tell you a little bit of a story about this. I had a student who was pestering me. They were bothering me. And this person, who will not be named, kept sending me messages on Instagram. And I try to always reply to my direct messages on Instagram. And this person kept saying, like, please, sir, make lists of words for me. Create a plan for me. Develop a course for me. Now, of course, this is a little bit cheeky, but I said, yes, yes, yes. You know, when you book classes with me, every week will be a different topic. I can send you the notes from class. I can also give you additional homework. But this person insisted on me creating like lists and a very old-fashioned course. So at that point, I had to butt in and interrupt and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold your horses. I don't work like that. And people usually don't learn like that either. So I put my foot down and said, the way you're going to actually improve your English and become fluent in English is by using the language. You need to start listening to podcasts. I have a podcast. Here's the link. You need to start watching videos. I have a YouTube channel. Here's the link. You need to watch Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney in English with subtitles in English, or remove the subtitles altogether. And that way, by surrounding yourself in the language, you're going to be learning so much for free every time you have free time, so that then when you have classes with me, we focus on correcting mistakes, improving your pronunciation, offering you new advanced alternatives to different phrases. Maybe if you've got a low level, reviewing some grammar. And this person didn't really get it. And I don't blame this person, but this is how we learn languages. We learn languages through immersion, like babies learn languages. They will be hearing their parents, grandparents, uncle, aunt, saying all of these different things all the time. They'll be going to school, surrounded in the language. And what we should do as adults learning a foreign language is try to create this artificial immersion as much as possible. We shouldn't actually think about it as studying per se, by writing out lots and lots and lots of different things and cramming all the new words in our brain. We should live the language. We should experience English in this case. What you should do is whatever you enjoy doing in your mother tongue, you should do it in English. If you like any kind of hobby, do it in English. You like reading? Do it in English. You like listening to music? Do it in English. You like listening to podcasts? Do it in English. Whatever you like doing, do it in English. That's my rant over. Rant over. And let's move on to the fourth point, which is something, to be honest, I think everybody can do, as long as you're serious about it, as long as you're really motivated. Because the fourth point is build consistency, not perfection. This is what the science says. Habit formation research shows that small, consistent actions beat intense but irregular study sessions. Because fluency is a habit, not a goal you reach overnight. That is the key thing. Like people say, little but often. If you make sure that every day you're doing something, you're on the right track. You're going in the right direction. I'm not going to lie. The more time you spend with the language, the better. But we all have lives. We all have obligations. And sometimes it's not possible. But what is possible is to build this consistency and stay consistent, constant, and every day do something. Anything. So here are some practical tips. You should set small daily goals. 10 minutes listening, 5 new phrases, a short new conversation, watching a video, you name it. Whatever keeps you motivated. You should also track your progress using maybe a calendar or an application, or just ticking off the days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Have I done some English every day? Tick, tick, tick. If not, So track your progress and it'll help you to stay motivated. But also, I mentioned how important repetition is. You can't learn new words if you only see them once. So that's why we should always try to review and recycle vocabulary every few days to reinforce your memory. But if you don't do this with a list or an application, don't worry. Because by immersing yourself in the language, it's going to happen naturally. It's going to take place anyway. So a couple of nice expressions. Little by little, bit by bit, step by step. Progress happens gradually. And make sure you stick to it. Stick to it. Stick to something is to continue doing something, to keep practicing consistently. We often use this phrasal verb at the beginning of the year when you are setting some New Year's resolutions of, this year, I'm going to go to the gym every single day. After a week, you've given up. After a week, you're lying down on the sofa, ordering a takeaway, drinking a beer, and all of these good habits are out of the window. So what you need to try to do is stick to it. Don't give up. Stick to the habits. Now, a question for you. What small daily language habit could you start today? And how would you track it? I've given you some ideas, but let me know in the comments if you're going to start some new daily language habits from today. I look forward to reading your answers. Now, the fifth point is mix active and passive learning. Active and passive learning. So it states that active learning, speaking, writing, strengthens your recall, your ability to recall words, phrases, etc. While passive learning, listening, reading, builds comprehension. But using both together helps your brain retain language better. Of course, for many people, passive learning is much easier. It's not embarrassing. You can do it very easily, at any time. There's less effort because it's passive. But as a result, you're not really going to improve your speaking skills or writing skills very much if you only do passive learning. I'm guilty of doing this. This is what I do most of the time. But if you want to jump up and take the next step in your development, you need to find the time and force yourself to also do active learning, speaking, writing. As I said earlier, you can speak to a tutor, AI, yourself, or a language partner. So it's not that tricky once you make the decision. That's the key point. Making the decision and sticking to it. So, a couple of tips. After listening to a podcast, summarize it aloud or write a short paragraph. Maybe after watching one of my videos or listening to an episode of the podcast, you can discuss what I discussed in your own words. See how it goes. But also, I recommend listening to English music, podcasts, audiobooks while doing other activities. the famous expression, kill two birds with one stone. Learn whilst you're doing something else. This one, I think it's simple, I think it's basic, and I reckon you're already doing it. I hope so, anyway. So let's move on to the 6th point, which is to focus on pronunciation early. Because pronunciation is hard to master. In particular for, how do I put it? Elderly people. If you're a little bit older, and when you were growing up, you weren't immersed in movies, series, podcasts, then you're less accustomed to the sounds of English. And that means that it's harder for you to impersonate, imitate, and copy how native English speakers actually sound. And it means you didn't really focus on pronunciation at an early age. I have many students who tell me that when they were at school, their teacher spoke awful English. So, of course, they started to speak like their teacher, who had terrible pronunciation. So, they were learning from a bad example. Obviously, that's not good. But then you compare this to children who, were surrounded by good English language speakers when they were growing up. So, consequently, they focused on pronunciation earlier and began mimicking when they were young. So, pronunciation should not be overlooked. We should always give it a lot of importance. And this is why. Research shows that focusing on sound patterns, intonation, and rhythm helps with both speaking and listening. Early practice reduces the likelihood of fossilized mistakes later. What do I mean by a fossilized mistake? Well, it's a mistake that you have made so many times without it being corrected that you will start to believe that it's actually correct. There are some examples with this, classic words that are mispronounced, but you'll mispronounce them so many times that you'll think, it must be correct. An example here would be finally, when it should be finally. Like I mentioned earlier, perhaps bitch and beach. You might not realize that you're making a pronunciation error, so then you keep saying it, and it keeps becoming more and more normal for you and more natural for you, that it just stays like that, to be frank. So what can you do? How can you actually put this piece of advice into practice? Well, shadowing. I've made a couple of videos on shadowing in the past, and it is when you repeat exactly what a native English speaker says, using the same intonation, the same tone, and basically trying to copy people. Let me go back to the example of me being in France, in Paris, a couple of weekends ago, and I was kind of making fun of my friend. I was copying some of the sounds that he makes. Because if you're French, you probably know this. If not, let me explain it to you. French people use a lot of sounds. English people do the same, of course, and in many different languages, but French, they do it a lot. What sounds am I referring to? Well, like, ba, la, 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 tick, tack, up, la. So they'll make lots of random sounds. So I was kind of copying my friend and repeating some of the words that they use a lot, like franchement, tu vois, je crois, je sais pas, and always with this way of speaking. And this might sound a bit rude, but it's an amazing way to improve your pronunciation. The best language speakers are probably actors, because actors are so used to copying, impersonating, and taking on a role so that then they're like pretending to be someone else. And at least at the beginning, when you're trying to improve your pronunciation, you are pretending to be English. You're pretending to be Australian. After that, you can choose if you want to focus on pronunciation or you want to keep your accent because you're proud of it, and that's fine. Each to their own. But in the beginning, at least to neutralize your accent, you should basically imagine you are an actor or actress, and you're trying to take on the role of an Englishman, an Englishwoman, and sound just like them. So shadowing is really useful, and sometimes it's fun as well. But not only that, as we mentioned earlier, you can record your voice and compare it to native speakers, realize what sounds should be changed and which ones should be kept. You can improve your connected speech pronunciation, like gonna, wanna, do you wanna go? Like, do you wanna go? Do you wanna go? And that way you'll sound more natural. And then, as I've mentioned, focus on word stress and sentence intonation, not just on individual sounds, but how sounds come together and combine. Now, let me move on to the next point, which is number 7. And the emoticon attached with this is, it's a love heart. And this shows that you should try to connect emotionally with the language. If you like the language, you love the language, well, you're going to learn faster. I guarantee it. Because motivation is emotional. Associating English with things you love makes learning enjoyable and sustainable. It's like going on a diet. Some people can go on a diet. They're very, very strict with the diet. They'll eat lettuce. And basically that's it. Chicken breast, tomatoes, veggies. But they'll never have any cheat days. They'll never have anything that isn't bad for them. So then, when they finish the diet after losing weight, they tend to go back to their old habits. And then they'll be having loads of burgers and sweets and cake and loads of carbs. Because, well, it wasn't sustainable in the first place. The diet wasn't sustainable. And with learning a language, if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to be sustainable. Most people can't become fluent in a language and maintain it without actually practicing. So you have to enjoy it and realize that you're always going to be in contact with English if you want it to stick. And if you want to keep getting better, or at least prevent yourself getting rusty. So that's important. But what you can also do is, well, read, watch, listen to topics you're passionate about, follow influencers, YouTubers, or podcasters in English, think in English when journaling or planning your day. You can join online communities where people share your interests as well. And basically, you need to make it a part of your life. You need to live the language, not study it. Let's move on to number 8 now. We'll keep going because I've been speaking for 50 minutes already. Wow, what a chatterbox. I can talk for England, right? So, the 8th point is to use technology wisely. This is the science. Digital tools help personalize learning and track progress. Then spaced repetition and interactive platforms boost memory retention. I know, it's not an exact science. It's more just a bit of an introduction. But what I mean by this is that you can use applications like Anki or Quizlet for spaced repetition. You can chat with AI tutors for instant feedback, which, by the way, it's a bit of a waste of money if you pay for an application that is an AI tutor, because the technology is just ChatGPT. And often it's a lower version of ChatGPT. So there's my tip. If you're going to talk to AI, just talk to ChatGPT or Gemini for that matter. It'll be free and it's more advanced. So yeah, hopefully I don't get in trouble for that. And if there are any AI applications that want to sponsor any videos or do any collaborations with me, well, they probably shouldn't listen to this podcast. Anyway, let's keep going. Of course, you can listen to podcasts or watch videos that suit your level and record your own explanations of topics in English and review them. But that's kind of me just repeating myself. And really, a nice phrase here is to work smarter, not harder, which is related to business and work, but it can be applied in this domain as well. Wherever there's an opportunity where you can use technology to speed up your learning, speed up your progress, do it. Embrace the technology. I know that I use technology a lot to be more productive and, well, make working more efficient. So you should do the same when learning English. But let me know, I've mentioned some apps and tools previously during the last 50 minutes. Which ones have you tried? Which language learning applications or digital tools have you tried? And did it work for you? Or was it enjoyable for you? Let me know in the comments. Maybe you've tried Duolingo, maybe you've tried Busuu, maybe you've tried Babbel. I'm all ears. I want to know how your experience was. And finally, the one that I have been mentioning throughout this podcast is that you should be immersing yourself in the real culture. Because fluency isn't just about words. It's about understanding how people communicate naturally. The best learners tend to be fascinated about the country and the culture. That means that you're going to be more consistent. You're going to stick to it. So if you can do this, you'll already be at an advantage. You'll be watching films or series without dubbing, learning idioms, slang, colloquial expressions, engaging in virtual exchanges, or traveling to English-speaking countries. And you might even pay attention to humor, tone, and social cues. Because when in Rome, do as the Romans do. If you want to go to the UK, I think this is a good thing to live by. You should adapt to the culture to truly understand it and copy how people speak and behave. Because when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So let me just summarize this podcast, which I hope you've enjoyed. And if so, make sure you leave a like or a 5-star review on Spotify. Because here are my final thoughts. Fluency doesn't happen overnight, but it happens when you show up every day and enjoy the process. So remember, listen a lot, speak often, learn naturally, stay curious. And as the saying goes, practice makes perfect, or practice makes progress. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going. Don't give up and stick to it. And that's it. That is this week's podcast, teaching you how to become fluent in English. Hopefully, you've enjoyed this episode. And if you want me to focus more on language learning, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do so. So, thanks once again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!